Okay, welcome to the next episode of In Good Company. Today, we're actually joined with an absolutely beautiful guest that we actually got. She's a client of ours, Dr. Anna Pham. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Before we actually sort of go into what we're going to talk about today, Anna, and add value to our listeners, I'd like to introduce Anna properly. Dr. Anna Pham came to Australia as a refugee and as a mother, GP practice owner, property investor, and accidental G-preneur. I think I pronounced that right. Over a span of 10 years, Anna has built a multi-million-dollar property portfolio and achieved financial independence through passive income. Her portfolio consists of residential as well as commercial properties. We're going to delve into that deeply today. In 2024, Anna also founded Dr. Helping Doctors Grow, a Facebook group. The aim of this group is to educate and enhance the financial literacy of medical professionals at all stages of their career, working on their mindset, coaching and mentoring doctors for the betterment of their emotional as well as financial health. That's significant, Anna. That's awesome. DHDG, which is Doctors Helping Doctors Grow, aims to allow doctors the freedom to be more effective and happier clinicians. Fantastic. Anna continues her work as a full-time GP in Picton and Narellan in New South Wales, Sydney. In 2021, she was winner of the Wollondilly Women in Business Inspiring and Outstanding Leader Award, and her practice was finalist in the 2022 Telstra Business of the Year Award. Fantastic. Her long and dedicated contribution to a local community, especially during the COVID pandemic, was recognised by the Australian government in 2022 with the Local Woman of the Year Award. I think I know a little bit about this.
Okay.
So that's amazing. Anna, can I just say I'm so happy that you're on the podcast today.
I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for making time. Thank you so much for sort of, coming to our event last night as well that we had, and we had a really good time, and it was amazing to have you there in the event, and also here recording a podcast today. So today, I want to know about your personal life. I want to know about your professional life. I want to know about your investing life. I want to know all about it. I feel like doctors around Australia can really learn from what you've done. As a client of ours, we know a little bit about you with regards to how you've sort of gone about setting up your property portfolio, how you're going in your trading businesses. All of that looks phenomenal. So you've not only had a great growth in your investing journey, but your trading businesses are thriving at the moment. And it's just so amazing to see all of that. So Anna, let's just start from the very beginning.
Sure.
We'll break it down. There's a few things to unpack today.
Okay.
But Anna, we'll break it down. Talk to us about your journey from Vietnam to Australia. I think I've heard it.
Yes.
I feel like the listeners need to hear this as well.
Okay. All right. Well, psychologists and psychotherapists would tell us, Shubham, that everything starts from childhood.
Amazing.
So it's a really good place to start, because I think it really has formed the Anna of today, and at least the mindset of the Anna of today. So I am a boat refugee from Vietnam. I was handed over to a stranger at the age of 6. And I was placed under the care of my then 21-year-old auntie. And on this boat journey, we traversed the China Sea and were picked up by Malaysian soldiers.
Wow.
And placed in a refugee camp or concentration camp in Malaysia. We were the fortunate ones. When I say we were fortunate, in that we were only at sea for a week before being picked up. There were no deaths that I recollect. And I was in the concentration camp for a total of 6 months only. I was lucky that I had some relatives. I had an auntie and an uncle that was already here in Australia, and they sponsored us, and the Australian government granted us, I don't know what they call it, they granted us sponsorship, so we were able to come to Australia on a refugee status. And that was back in 1983. So I arrived in November 1983, and I think I was around 8 at the time.
You said 6 months only you were in the concentration camp, Anna.
Yes.
I've never asked you this, but do you have any recollection of the memory of how that environment was?
I remember the colour brown
and
grey.
Okay.
I remember being on my own a lot.
Yes.
Meandering through muddy streets and laneways.
Wow.
I remember makeshift lodgings.
Okay.
I don't think they were houses or homes.
Sure.
And I remember just going through life observing the adults around me.
Yeah.
So they were the memories. So I suppose back to your question about how life all started, I also remember being on the boat and being the only person on the boat that didn't vomit and didn't cry.
Wow.
And I wrote a post on this on LinkedIn where I said that was the first time I realised, even as a child, that I could go into my mind and be different and set myself apart from other people. And I remember because you're in this little fishing boat and you're hidden underneath where the engine is.
Yeah.
And you're rocking in the China Sea.
Yeah.
And so that is just conducive to seasickness.
Yeah, of course
you know?
it is, yeah.
And my little baby brother at the time, he was afraid. So he was crying, and that's a big no-no when you're trying to be quiet and find yourself out of there.
My goodness.
So in that rocky environment, surrounded by fear, surrounded by vomit, the body would want to react in the same way.
Yeah.
And the only way to not do that, I blanked out my surroundings.
Wow.
And I stopped hearing the noises around me.
Wow.
And I could not smell anything around me.
Oh.
And I stopped that wave of nausea. What it means now as an adult is that I'm actually quite good at drowning out the noise around me.
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
It comes at an opportunity cost. My kids tell me that I'm not a very good listener sometimes, but I'm very good at drowning out the noise around me, and I don't get it affect me. And I stay in my own lane and I do my own thing.
That's an unbelievable story. And I have to say, I'm a father of a 2.5-year-old boy and a 10 weeks old little daughter. And if I was to be told that, at 8 years of age, my kids would have to sort of, go through that journey, I would just basically have chills, and I'd be like, oh my God, I don't know if I can actually ever see my kids go through that. So for you to have been through such an enormous event at the age of 8 is it's unbelievable. And the fact that you're actually able to gain a lot of inspiration from that event and have that event shape your life to a certain degree is great. Yeah. So good, Anna. Talks a lot about your personality.
Well, I can't take credit for it because it was life and that just happened. It was just the state of the times. And it was the option was for my father to hand me over and hopefully the journey would provide a better future for me or stay behind. And there was not going to be a future for me.
Correct.
Or something in between might happen.
Yes.
I suppose how it's also shaped me, Shubham, is that I'm comfortable with leaning into pain.
Yes.
And, when I talk with doctors now, there is so much fear. It doesn't matter how they frame their question.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how they frame their feelings of uncertainty around starting their private practice or buying their first residential property, or do I do resi versus commercial? Do I do property versus shares? Do I do Bitcoin or do I not do Bitcoin? Underlying it all is that uncertainty, that fear, that anxiety of not knowing enough to be able to take that first action. I don't have that problem because I've had to lean into pain all of my life, starting from a very young age. Yeah. That doesn't mean that I don't feel the physical symptoms of anxiety.
Of course.
I recognise it. It's taken me actually into adulthood to recognise my own symptoms of anxiety.
Of course.
That knot in my stomach, that insomnia at night.
Yes.
That cloudiness in the head. Yes. I now recognise very quickly that they're my anxiety symptoms. Yes. And it feels so uncomfortable, Shubham.
Yes.
It feels so uncomfortable and I dislike it so much that the only way for me to overcome it is to actually lean into it and to take action because that gets rid of my anxiety symptoms. Yeah. I'm sure a psychotherapist or a psychologist might have things to say about that, but that's how I address my anxiety. I lean into my pain. Yeah.
It's very interesting that you say that because obviously running a business at a young age myself and having come to this country with nothing in my hand as well, obviously I'm sort of also making a few decisions that sort of can have a negative or a greatly positive impact on my family and my own well-being. Yeah. So the risk-taking appetite has increased, obviously. And with that comes anxiety to me,
Yes.
to myself as well.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I'm married to a wife who's a psychologist,
Yes.
and she's a very good psychologist.
Yes.
That one thing she always reminds me when I do sort of go through those phases is, Shubham, the fact that you actually recognize that you're anxious, the fact that you can actually see your physical or sense your physical symptoms, which is what you talked about, you know, that funny thing in the stomach, those heart palpitations, that cloudiness in the head and all that. She says, if you can actually recognize it, you're already doing better than a lot of others out there that are suffering through anxiety or, you know, sort of high stress environments. So I reckon what you're doing is absolutely phenomenal, Anna. And regardless of the fact that, you know, there is pain involved, you just decide to persist through and you decide to go ahead with it, it is what really sort of stands you out of the crowd, I think. I had the pleasure of attending your Christmas party last weekend.
Yes.
And
I'm so grateful for you coming and for the effort that
No,
you
no,
put
no,
into coming to Sydney for that. So really appreciative.
I'm so happy I was there. I feel like that event actually made me know you a little bit better than what I already knew. Because prior to that, we've spoken over Zoom, we've spoken over phone calls and things like that. But that event was fantastic because even that Narellan clinic that you actually started, the whole story behind it and how long it has been for you to sort of, you know, start that clinic and to basically have that Christmas party where everyone sort of comes together, enjoys the premise, state of the art, absolutely fantastic practice that you set up there. Is great because 4.5 years in the making or something like that.
10.
Oh my God, 10 years in the
It's a big history. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 10 years in the making. We'll probably unpack that a little bit later on as well. But 10 years in the making, you've got, you know, like there was so many instances where you could have just thrown the towel in, but you didn't. You went ahead with it. I've done a property development recently as well, and I know the stresses involved with property development, especially when the site is not income earning. It's not yielding any income at all.
That's right.
It's only, the cash is only going one way. And you persisted through and you made sure that actually happened. I take my hats off to you. So that's awesome. And this is what I love the best about my job, because I actually get to know the clients like yourself, get inspired by them and sort of take my steps forward as well. So
Thank you.
good. And I thank you for that great introduction. I think that sort of sets us up really well for this episode. Let's sort of fast forward a few more years. You've obviously done your medical degree, and knowing you a little bit more, I think one of the things that I was reading about you in doing my research was that you were probably the first one to get a degree in your household, or the only one at the time when you did. Amazing. Talk to us a little bit.
Oh, that's right. I don't know where you got that information from. I must have written it in a blog somewhere. But you're absolutely correct. I was very much raised by my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who was an illiterate woman. And her husband was a rickshaw driver.
My goodness.
So that's
God. Wow.
That's my heritage. And he died from TB at the age of 30, leaving her as a young illiterate woman to raise 6 kids on her own. Wow. This is before Vietnam War broke out. Wow. And that was the environment that I was raised in.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. From where to where in one generation?
In one generation, yes, that's right. My father then got into uni.
Yes.
So by that generation, he was able to get into uni. But then war came, so he never finished uni. Then came our generation. I mean, everyone in our generation has now got tertiary studies of one way, shape or form.
Yes.
But I fly the Pham flag to be the only doctor.
How good. How good.
So I'm living the Vietnamese dream.
That's awesome.
The Vietnamese parents' dream.
That's fantastic.
So that's my claim to fame.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it sort of runs in Asia in general, you know, like even Indians as well. We love to have our kids become doctors or accountants or engineers and so on and so forth. So very, very similar sentiment there. That's awesome. That's great, Anna. So Anna, you finished your uni. I think I heard a little bit about how you actually sort of went into Picton Family Medical Centre as well, which is your clinic that you actually run. Tell us about what made you start your own business. I'd love to know that. And I think in my field as well, I actually meet a lot of doctor clients, and these are young people who would love to be able to sort of, set up their own practice one day. For the sake of them, I'd love to hear what drove you and what was involved in that process.
Okay. Really good question. And my answer is based on the fact that I've had 20 years of reflection.
Right.
Okay. But going through it, I didn't know it. So my sleepless nights wasn't from being anxious about the upcoming exams, trying to pass the fellowship, trying to get to the other end of the training. That didn't cause me sleepless nights. What got me drinking and caused me a lot of angst and personal frustration was the actual practices and how it was operated.
I see.
So as a registrar, you moved around from practice to practice on a 6-monthly cycle. Sometimes you stay for a little bit longer. Sometimes it could be 12 months plus. But at minimum, it's 6 months. And so the idea is that you're getting exposure both clinically and non-clinically in how a practice is run and operated. And it was the operational part of the business that I would feel frustrated by.
Right.
So that was my first inkling that I thought I had ideas of how to do it better. And so I started looking to private practice very early on. I started taking notice of how the practices that I was in were run, from little things like, well, how many staff did they have on during the day?
Yes.
How were their appointment books organised?
Yes.
How were they stocking their treatment room? What kind of facilities were they using? So I took notice of those little things.
Yes.
And kind of stored them away at the back of my mind.
Yes.
And I pretty much found, eventually it became Picton, but there were other deals that were presented to me prior to that. I pretty much started my own practice 12 months after having attained fellowship.
Sure.
Now, I would have done it straight after finishing fellowship, but I thought it was wise to wait a year.
Yeah.
Because then it allowed me to bring in extra doctors if I waited another year, because I went through the training very quickly.
Yeah.
I was decisive, put my name down for the training program, got it done roughly 12 months before everyone else did, because everyone else took an extra year in hospital to decide which training program to go into. So I thought I'd wait for my peers to catch up so that I could have a better chance at recruitment.
Sure. That sounds good. So could you just remind me again, how long were you working for another clinic before you started your own?
Right. So when you go through general practice training, you do your 5 to 6 years of med school, depending on which university you got into. So I did the 6 years at New South Wales. Then you do a minimum of 2 years in hospital as a junior doctor. And then you have to choose your specialty program.
Sure.
And for general practice, that's an additional 3 years. So I was in other practices for roughly 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. So 3 years is actually a very short time.
Very short time.
Before you actually jump into the big world of sort of running your own business.
That's
because
right.
obviously that comes with the pain of recruitment, pain
Yes.
of sort of expenses.
Yeah.
You sort of think about the money that's actually going out first before you actually start thinking about the money that's coming in.
Yes.
So how did you get prepared? What drove you? Like, why is it that you actually wanted to become a practice owner rather than just keep working where you were working earlier?
I suppose I observed my supervisors and the practice owners who were much older than I at that stage, and I came to the recognition that age and experience doesn't equal a good operator.
Yeah. I'll take that. Yeah. Age and experience doesn't equal a good operator. Sure.
Yeah.
That's similar to most fields.
To most fields, yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose that then gave me the confidence to say, look, I'm young, I'm naive, I don't know much, but the best thing to learn, or the best way to learn, is by doing.
Yeah.
And I'm very much a doer.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to learn as I go along. So I was talking to a doctor last night who said, well, how do you do it? Because there are so many things to consider, and what if you get it wrong?
Yeah.
I said, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about timelines, and let's get the timelines in perspective.
Break it up.
You want me to break up the timelines?
Nice.
Anna's famous timelines?
Yeah, would love to hear.
Yeah, okay. So
Anna's famous timelines. We'll trademark this.
we'll trademark
Let's do this.
So remember 2, 7, and 10.
Yes.
They're the numbers that I stick in my mind. They're my timelines. It takes 2 years to establish a business, 2 years to adjust to any new thing in life. So we discussed at my Christmas party, I said to you, how long did it take you to court your wife? And it was roughly 2 years. You know, how long before getting married and buying your first home? Usually it's 2 years. How long between first home and first child? Usually 2 years. How old the age gap between your first and second child? And it's usually 2 years. So it's 2 plus or minus 12 months, right? So sometimes it takes 3 years. Sometimes at 18 months. But if we remember 2 years, it's a really important number, because if I open a practice or open a business or enter a new venture or start a new job and I'm 9 months in and I feel like I'm failing, remember you're only 9 months in out of a 2-year journey. You haven't failed. You're not even halfway through the journey. You haven't worked it out yet, because everything that's being presented to you is still first time presentation. You're still having to work things out as you go along. So while I have the 2-year time frame, I'm pivoting on a day-to-day, week by week. And during COVID, I was pivoting on an hour-to-hour basis. You need to be able to be flexible within your plan, even though you've got structured timelines in place. So 2 years to get something from the ground up for business. So I gave myself that 2 years. 7 years. The 7-year itch in relationship holds true for business as well. We spoke to one of the doctors last night who said, I'm 7 years into my very busy, thriving business, but I don't feel the same passion anymore. And it's because his goals had changed. He's got a young family now, and the passion is to spend time with his young family, not spending 24/7 growing the business, even though that's thriving. And I think my advice to him was, you know, you're just at that junction in life where your priorities have changed, and your underlying question actually is, how do I make enough passive income to be able to spend time with my family? Because right now, all of my active income comes from my active physical labor, which is taking my time away from my family. So I said, immerse yourself with your family right now, and then you need to re-strategize your plan for the next couple of years. So that's 7 years. You're going to come to that juncture at the 7 years. Am I going to take my business to the next level, or am I going to wrap it up and reprioritize, right? 10 years. So the third number for me is 10 years. I plan in 10-year cycle. So if I start an idea at age 40, I don't want you to judge me until I'm 50, because I haven't taken my business venture to its full fruition. I give myself 10 years. Yeah, so they're my timelines. 2 years to get started, 7 years to decide what I want to do with that business. And if I decide at the 7-year mark that I'm going to continue, then at 10-year mark, it's my golden goose.
While you're talking, Anna, the hair on my body were actually raising. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I feel like I've actually unlocked your persistence.
Right, yeah.
I reckon that's what it is. The key to your persistence is this.
Yeah.
You are not judging yourself too quickly.
No.
Before you sort of just throw it in. You are giving yourself a fair chance before you decide whether it's for me or it's not for me. I absolutely love that. I feel like psychologically, this 2, 7, and 10-year cycle is something that I'm going to implement in my business, because I see so many young business owners, young finance brokers in my case, where they start the business, first 3 months, 6 months, nothing's happening, throwing the towel. I don't think it's for me. I don't think it's for me. I feel like I need to go back to the bank. I need to start working the same way I was earlier and go from there. But like having that sort of direction where you go, no, hang on a second. You haven't finished 2 years yet. Keep going.
You're only 3 months in. Don't let your fear, don't let the anxiety at this point stop you.
Illusion.
Yeah.
It's illusion. So let's just keep going with regards to keep pushing, keep putting the right seeds in. And like anything, seeds obviously also take time to reap.
That's right.
And we just got to be able, all we got to figure out is just sort of, put the right water, right fertilizer, right mud, right soil, and all that kind of stuff, and it'll happen.
That's right. And sometimes you'll get it wrong. And the plants may die here and there, but that's okay. So long as the garden flourishes overall, you'll be okay.
Anna, you're so good. I love this. Far out. Yeah. This is so good. I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying
glad.
this.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you. Psychologically, great. Yep. That's awesome. So once again, we'll take it back to a young doctor.
Yes.
A young medical professional that's looking to, sort of start their practice. Obviously, 2, 7, 10 years, they're bought into that.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic methodology or metaphor. I'm going to use that in my business, but let's say a doctor sort of decides to take that. What would your advice be in terms of the finance side of things?
Okay. They need to understand and recognize and accept where they're at in their financial journey. If you're at the beginning stages in your business journey, then you've got to lay some foundations and keep it very simple. Right? I keep it very simple. So back in the day when I first started, I wanted to keep my costs down. So I had a couple of rules. Number one, cost has got to be low because I wanted to make a profit from year one. And in order to achieve that, costs had to be low. That's number one. Keep costs low. Try to find alternative form of revenue stream to cover your operating costs. So, for example, your own hard-earned physical labour is one way of producing income, but you've got to find other ways. And in general practice, you can have subtenants like pathology, like allied health, like if you can recruit other GPs to work for you. And the service fees or the sub-rents that they provide will help to cover the operating costs.
Sure.
So I became very good at negotiating those things. They were the two main factors that I applied in the first 2 years. So just to give you some numbers, when I bought Picton, it was making a loss.
Yeah.
So I was able to buy it at a very low price. I bought it for $30,000.
Wow.
Right? So I bought it at $30,000. It was pretty much just the cost price for the consumables and the debt that was still on there for the consumables in the treatment room.
Anna, we've talked about Picton. Can you just elaborate that for our listeners as to what that Picton means?
All right. So Picton is a regional area in New South Wales. Picton's position between Campbelltown and Bowral, for those who may know the area quite well. And back in the day, no one knew of that town.
Wow.
It was really a quiet regional rural town. It's not like that anymore, but that was the environment that I walked into. And it was in that environment that I came into practice ownership. This is 16, 18 years ago.
16, 18 years ago. Just like your 2, 7, 10-year terminology, I want people to also understand that, hey, if you do sort of take on this methodology, at the end of the day, at the end of the tunnel, this is what's possible for you. You know, so this is the result that you could look into if you were to sort of tread the same path.
Yes,
that's all.
Yeah, and then second piece of advice would be use your active income. Now, when I say active income, it doesn't matter whether it's the income that you've derived from the business or the income from your hard-earned physical labour through working as a doctor in hospital. They're all active income.
Yeah.
I then channel that active income into investments so that the investment can be my source of passive income.
Yes.
Now, we can unpack the investment part and say, well, there are active components to investing and there's passive components to investing. For the purposes of this conversation right now, let's just consider that all passive because I'm not having to, put in the physical labour to produce an income from that.
You don't have to have billable hours.
You don't have to have billable hours. That's it. So I did that very early.
Yeah.
I did. And my driver for doing that was because I was a single mother. I needed a backup plan to take care of my kids in case something went wrong with me.
Yes.
So I was driven by anxiety about feeling ill, having some form of catastrophe occur to me.
Yes.
And then my kids, and I have a wonderful extended family and they've got their father who will take care of them as well. But as a mother, you don't feel like anyone can take care of them as well as you can. It's just that maternal instinct.
Yeah.
So the drive was there to find ways to be able to take care of them financially if something was to occur to me.
Yes.
So I channeled a lot of my active income into passive investments.
Yeah.
And just by doing that consistently, over a decade and now 2, that's where you see the results of compounding that's occurred for me now.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting because the emotions are actually very similar. For a young business person myself as well, to have that sort of anxiety that okay, if I'm going at 100 miles per hour, I sort of always think to myself that like what if something was to happen to me? What sort of happens afterwards? So yeah, that's a very common sentiment that we all feel. So we've talked about the finances, we've talked about the methodology that we can actually look at the 2, 7, 10 years. Anything else that you would like to sort of impart to young health practitioners that are looking to start their own practice?
At the last conference that I was at in March of this year, I met a couple, doctor couple. So they already had a private practice, but they were renting their space, as I do in Picton. Sometimes the timing's right, but the property's not there, so you rent, and that's okay as well. You don't have to own every single property that you work in. So they were renting and looking to purchase their own private practice. What they discovered was that through the years, they and their accountant were so good at lowering their profit levels that now borrowing capacity became a problem.
Right.
So I suppose my second takeaway point for our listeners is that I myself take care of the business and I myself want to show a healthy profit level because that helps with lending and that helps with finance. But let's get the accountants involved in the tax structuring part, and that's how we can minimise our taxable income legitimately.
Yeah.
Right? So take care of your business, don't hide profits, but tax structure it properly with the help of a very good strategic accountant.
It's a very interesting point that you made here, Anna, because being in the finance and lending field, many a times we actually have business owners who sort of come to us and say, hey, this is my income, but we want to buy this.
Yeah.
Now, one common misconception is that, if you hide your income or if you, I wouldn't use the word hide your income. I'd say if you sort of, up your expenses, lower your profit, pay less tax and all of that kind of stuff. I think that's where, you sort of pay less tax and in your eyes, you're a winner. But the borrowing strategy and the taxation strategies do not sort of go hand in hand. Well, what I mean by that is if you go really hard on saving tax, and sort of by what right means or by whatever channels you sort of utilizing, lower your income, your borrowing strategy does not play well in that scenario. Because at the end of the day, when you come into me to be able to let's say buy a new practice or buy a new commercial property that you can operate from later on, or buy a new sort of residential property for yourself to grow your investment portfolio, what bank is looking at is the overall profitability of the business, overall financial health of the business. So at the end of the day, I think you're absolutely right. It's so important to have the right accountant that can assist you in the best manner on how to structure your family group and your corporate tree. So at the same time, you can have the best tax minimization strategies, but at the same time, while you're minimizing your tax without being so technical, you can also have some add backs. And those add backs can be taken into account by the bank so we can increase your borrowing capacity.
That's it. You were saying last night how your day never ends or doesn't feel complete unless you've had that discussion with your accountant or have had a chat with your accountant.
A big shout out to Moricott. Yeah. He's actually a very, very close mate of mine and also an accountant of our business and he's fantastic. So I actually love to sort of pick his brains. I'm not the best in tax. I'm still learning. I think I'm still in the year 1 or year 2 of the tax school. Got 10 years ahead of me. But and I think that's probably one point that I also want to sort of mention to the doctors as well, or the listeners in general. Like, tax world is not for us to understand fully from day one.
That's right.
It takes time for us to understand, okay, how the tax world works. It's not the most interesting topics. It's a very dry subject that, it takes time for us to basically understand the working of it. And let's not be sort of afraid of it. Let's just sort of, give ourselves 2, 7, 10 years.
That's right.
To understand it.
Yes.
And sort of take it from there.
Yeah.
But the sooner we understand it, the better it is, though.
That's right.
Because it's important to not throw in the towel and not understand it, because yes, you may have a great accountant by your side, but at the same time, it's also very, very important that you actually understand what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Like anyone, like I feel like one thing that I sort of learned very early on is trust but verify.
Yes.
And you can't verify until you know what's actually happening. So trust is great. You can have a great partner by your side. This goes to family. This goes to corporate. This goes to working relationship. No problems at all. But like at the end of the day, for your own sanity, that's the sort of mantra that I use anyway.
Absolutely. And you know what? Can I add on? And we're segueing a little bit, but in my journey with working with accountants or brokers or solicitors, I'm evolving and growing with time.
Yeah.
And my knowledge base is also growing with time.
Yes.
And often the person who helped me at the beginning foundational phase may not be the right person to elevate me to the next phase.
Yes.
So there's the concept of outgrowing your accidental mentors and coaches as well.
100%.
So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And if you get, if the doctors get to a stage where you feel like the advice may not suit you, it's okay to seek a second opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. So I think that sort of wraps up a couple of things that we can sort of impart to a new health practitioners that they can sort of take away and hopefully that's added value for them. And I'd like to now dive deep into your portfolio, your investment journey.
Okay.
So obviously you spoke about how it's very important for you to have a profitable business that will help you aid this investment strategy that you've actually got. What were the sort of motives or what was your thinking behind buying more residential properties, more commercial properties?
So I had zero knowledge or experience, nor coaching or mentoring in the investment space, zero. My first foray into an investment would probably be the first principal place of residence that was purchased as our married home, and that was purchased 12 months after becoming a doctor. So we're now looking in the 2000s where the interest rates were, 8-9%. 12 months out, there wasn't enough of a deposit. Back then, the 95% no LMI for your home for doctors wasn't a thing. They wanted at least 90%. We didn't have 90%. We only had 5%, so we paid lender's mortgage insurance. So we paid lender's mortgage insurance, purchased this really crappy home in Western Sydney. But 12 months later, the capital growth on that allowed us to pull on the equity and purchase our first investment property. So I suppose that's when I saw the value of compounding, or even just the value of property going up, that then gave me this income, this money on paper that allowed me to go and acquire more assets.
Yes.
Things that my hard labour, my active income alone wasn't sufficient to be able to achieve.
Yes.
So based on just that little experience, I then went on to acquire more properties. I had a reset in life at around the age of 35 when I became a single mother. After going through a 4-year hiatus and selling down some of the properties, as naturally happens during that time, I really started over again at the age of 35.
Right.
So by age 35, I was down to 2 properties.
Sure.
From the original 4 or 5, I can't remember.
Yes.
Down to 2. And we're now 12 years since then, 12, 13 years. And I'm on 11 properties.
Yes.
So
that's a mixture of resi and commercial.
That's a mixture of resi and commercial. I do have money in shares and I do have money in Bitcoin, but the portfolio isn't as big as property. Yeah.
And that's quite impressive, Anna. At the age of 35, you're starting, you've got young kids, you're a single mother, you're running a thriving business, and at the same time, you are also sort of amassing a property portfolio.
I think that's where I know behind the scenes there are doctors who are scratching their heads and want to know how. The number of properties is just a vanity metric.
It is.
Because it's the value that's important.
It is. It's the net worth that's important.
It's the net worth that's important, not
Correct.
the number of properties.
Correct.
But even the deeper question that's probably being asked, not to me directly, is how does a single mother, general practitioner, do it in 10 to 12 years?
Yes.
When there are those of my peers who are in specialties that are making double the amount that I'm making, and are of the same age and come from double income households, and have not amassed the same amount. And it's not a competition, but the question is there as to how.
Yeah.
And really, I am not a genius in this place. I am in this space. I am not special in any way. But like I've said to you before, the common ingredient that I happen to share with a lot of other entrepreneurs out there is that I lean into the pain and I take action and I do it consistently, and I'm persistent and consistent.
Yeah.
And I just rinse and repeat again and again and again until now I'm at the level of, I've gone from a beginner to intermediate to now advanced. That's it.
And that's a real key, isn't it? I feel like that's a real key because we always hear this cliche statement. It's not the time of the market, it's time in the market that you're actually buying the property. So we talked about compounding a little bit, and going back to your leaning in the pain statement, like at the end of the day, like, if you've amassed, let's say 2 or 3 properties and all of a sudden you feel like, oh, this is a really good opportunity, but this will actually cause me some stress financially. But you know what? Let's go for it because I feel like this will be a good investment in the next 5 years' time. You take that action and everything else, I feel in my experience, just starts to sort of fall in place. Once I've sort of taken that financial stress, all of a sudden my mind starts to tell me, Shubs, this is what you need to do in your business now. This is the kind of clients that you need to be attracting. So you're able to fund that investment. And I feel like that's probably what you mean by sort of leaning into the pain, because once you do lean into the pain, like your body tells you what needs to be done, or sort of, gives you indications of what needs to be done, your mind also gives you an indication of this is what you need to do for your next step.
Absolutely right. You take that first step and you'll encounter the next problem, which then you have to find a solution for.
Yes.
And then it keeps on rolling and going.
Yes.
And then the ball starts rolling.
Yeah. And this is the sort of sentiment that I sort of try to drive with my very ambitious investor clients, because sometimes they sort of go through a plateau as well, and they actually feel like, oh, you know what, I think we can sort of take a one year rest. So Priyanka right now is in the same space. My wife, like we've just finished property development. I've already started talking about our next project. She's like, no, can we actually just sort of wait for a year and things like that? And that's probably only once or twice that she's said it, but in 99% of the cases, she's actually standing with me with whatever step I'm taking. But property development can be a stressful process.
Yes.
And I feel like I've had a pleasure of actually experiencing that in a very young life. And Priyanka, who is 6 years younger than me, has had an experience of Priyanka, who is 6 years younger than me, has had an experience of sort of seeing all of that firsthand at a very young life.
But Shubham, I would consider you to be a beginner taking advanced stages in strategy and doing it very well. By that, I mean you're a young person venturing into property and going straight into development.
Yeah.
And doing really well by it.
Yeah.
Most of the time we're saying you want to get some foundational resi properties, then flirt with commercial and then go into development. But you're a visionary and you're a doer. You've just gone straight from, I'm a beginner, but I'm going to do development. I'm going to go straight into the X factor. And you've done really well by it, but not everyone has that kind of appetite.
I think leaning in the pain, I think we both share that sentiment, Anna, and I'm glad that we're doing it. I think it's just sort of, making our future generations more capable of taking making the choices that I probably wasn't able to make in my young ages. What actually attracted you to commercial property after you had done some resi investments?
So by the time COVID hit in 2020, my portfolio were a mix of resi and 2 commercial that I had acquired on my own. One of which is the Narellan that I've managed to just open. But I had another commercial property that is quite in close proximity, and the rental alone on that commercial property was equivalent, if not more, than the 5 resi that I had.
Yes.
So that cash flow difference alone over 10 years made me reflect on how resi and commercial property play out.
Yes.
It was very clear that the resis had really good capital growth. Yeah. They had doubled in value. I had purchased very sound properties that were sub $500,000, all in New South Wales. They had all doubled in value. I had lazy equity sitting there, which you're about to address. But then I had this one commercial property that was bringing in, over $100,000.
Yes.
And that was the equivalent to what all my, positively geared resi properties were doing.
Yeah.
And when COVID hits and you have to reflect on life and priorities, and realizing, the mortality of the human race, you realize that you actually really need an alternative form of income.
Yes.
To maintain your lifestyle and to take care of yourself and those around you. And you
Yeah.
can only do that with an income-producing asset.
Yes. And it's important to actually understand as well, because with residential investment, sometimes it actually may feel like you're actually working your physical labor time just to pay those mortgages.
Yes.
Whereas in a commercial, it actually sort of looks after itself because yield is higher.
Yes.
Resi investment yield is around 2 to 3%
Yes.
on average, whereas commercial can be anywhere between like sort of 5 to 10%, depending on the asset that you're sort of, buying, or
Net.
even more.
Yes,
Net.
that's right.
Because all the outgoings are for the landlord, for the tenant to take, not the
Yes.
landlord.
Yeah.
Whereas in residential, all the outgoings are for the landlord to
Yes.
sort of, look after. Narellan, you talked about a little bit. Give us a story of Narellan.
Narellan came with a lot of learning lessons. You can call it baggage, you can call it learning lessons. But it was a property that I acquired when the zoning for the area, so I live in the area, so I know my area very well, and the zoning had just turned from residential to mixed use. And so it was a great property for me to target as my next practice. And into that environment, I made an offer. It was on the market. I made an offer. I said, whatever you want, I'll pay you $50,000 more, because in my mind I'm thinking this is going to be worth $5 million more in 10 years' time. So I'll pay you $50,000 more. They said yes. So I acquired that property. I lost it through change in life circumstances. I purchased it back at double the value that I had negotiated on just a few years prior.
That's an unreal story.
Now, I don't fall in love with my properties. I have a very
let me just say
pragmatic
right now,
relationship with it, but I saw the potential in that property, right? And I was determined. I was determined to reacquire it. So it had exchanged hands. So it had gone through another purchaser.
vendor, yeah.
Gone through another vendor, and that vendor put it back on the market.
Yeah.
So I then became the next vendor at double the price.
Fantastic.
Or slightly
Okay.
more, but let's not go there. Yes.
We'll not talk about that too
Yes.
much. But the fact that you were able to do that was amazing. So what year was that?
So I reacquired it. It's got to be a couple of years before COVID, because
Yeah.
I went through the process of getting the application for and getting it to the stage of rebuilding. So I had plans drawn, DA approved, tendered, builder signed up, and my second practice was meant to open by May 2020,
Yeah.
sometime early 2020, and that's when COVID hit, and it's also when the builder declared bankruptcy. Foundation had been laid, the beams had been erected, walls were put up without a roof, and nothing was compliant.
My goodness.
So anything that I've been told by the construction solicitor and lawyer, that anything that can go wrong in construction went wrong with that building.
Right.
From the management, from the building compliance side, everything.
And were you able to recoup the funds?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
That's
Nana.
okay. But I'm now very, very well versed in construction and what
Okay.
needs to happen in construction
Yeah.
to make it compliant from
Must-
step
must-
A to step Z.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure you are, because must have been a very, very big learning curve, and must have been a painful process. But this is where I sort of really sort of go back to the fact that you persisted with Narellan is an unbelievable feat. So
It's a mind game, Shubham.
yeah,
The whole process was a mind game. I hadn't had to talk to solicitors very much up to that stage in my life, but it became a game, and it was a test of persistence.
yes,
How much can I drag Anna on for? How much can I bleed Anna financially?
yes,
How many obstacles can I throw in Anna's way before Anna throws in the towel
yes,
to say, I've had enough, let's wrap this up. Builder, go away. I'm going to let this hang over my head. they messed with the wrong woman.
Yeah.
If I'm going to play the persistence game, I can out-persist anyone.
Yeah.
But I had to, I couldn't let it go because unfinished meant that there were potential legal ramifications
Of course.
of having that relationship still in place.
Yes.
So that needed to be tied up and closed and put away very firmly.
Yes.
So so I couldn't let it go if I was to persevere with this property.
No,
Yeah.
that's. I hope you've got in your will that property doesn't go anywhere. that doesn't get sold.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of clients who actually had to sell 3 or 4 properties to basically be able to buy their dream home. And
Yes.
this dream home is basically
Yeah.
sea facing and
Yeah.
water facing
Yes.
in the most poshest of suburbs
Yeah.
in Melbourne. And that real estate is very, very limited.
Yes.
And they've actually got in their will that
Right.
this doesn't get sold.
Right. Okay.
You want to do anything with it, you can, but you can't sell it. So,
Right,
so
okay.
maybe one of the things that you probably.
In the will? No. I don't plan to have any control once I'm no longer on this earth. But I have to pivot the strategy for that property. If we treat each property as a business, which it should be, and it is,
Of course.
then this is no longer a 10-year plan.
You're right.
The numbers have changed.
Yeah.
Therefore, it becomes an intergenerational type of property.
Yeah.
My kids' generation will benefit from it, but
Yeah.
not from me. Oh,
Yeah, 100%.
But I made it happen.
And I actually feel like, you've touched a really good point. Property is not emotion. Property is transaction. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, sort of fall in that in that trap of, it's an emotion, and that's why they sort of take a little bit longer to sort of go to their next step. Because it sort of takes a bit of time to go through that cloud of emotion before you can really realize the value of that property. Thank you so much for talking about the resi and commercial. I think we've actually covered a lot of that topic today. It's which is fantastic. We're coming close to the sort of end part of our podcast. Just give us 3 core values that you practice in your business, and 3 core values in property investment.
Number 1, you got to love what you do.
Love it.
You got to love what you do, because what you choose to do come at a high emotional or financial cost and a time cost. Unless you're consumed by it, you're not going to be in the top 1%.
Love it.
In that industry. I am consumed by business because I love it. I'm consumed by property because I love it. My mind is always thinking and strategizing, and I'm always talking to people like you about it because I love it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you got to love it.
Yes.
Otherwise, you won't excel at it.
Yes.
The partialist doctors out there, they love what they do and they are consumed by it, and therefore they are excellent at it, right? So you got to love what you do, because you could be spending all of your time doing it except for your sleeping hours. So second thing is integrity.
Love it.
There have been times in my life when I've noticed that my relationships in business or my relationships in my personal life may not go as I planned, because either it's not always the other person, it could be I haven't been completely transparent in my dealings or in my transactions with them. So I think integrity is very important. Right? So be honest, and I think and trust that the other person will take the information that you give them in true faith, and they'll protect it, they'll guard it, and they'll take care of you with the information that you've given them. And if they don't, then the road and the relationship is very clear.
100%.
Yeah. But so I've learned that the more transparent and the more honest I am with my staff, the more of them I get back, because they can trust me.
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. So integrity. And then our third value is making a difference. This is patients, people that work for me, people that's in my inner circle. I think I can do better in asking myself the question, what value am I giving the other person, rather than asking what value is the other person giving me. It helps me in a couple of ways. Number 1, it takes away any anxiety in the interaction I have. So I think in trying to make a difference, I think I get more back. It's that contribution piece now.
Yes.
I suppose after 20 years of surviving, being in survival phase, and I told you that I'm sick of it.
Yeah.
That's the end of that phase. I'm in thriving phase from 2025 onwards.
Yeah.
And thriving means having the mental, psychological, and financial ability to give back to people.
Yes.
And I'm a very quality time person. So giving back means I'm going to give you my time and my experience and my thoughts, and I'm going to share them freely with you so that you can condense what I've done in 20 years down to 5 years. And and then when I die at my obituary, you'll say nice things, so it's the contribution piece making a difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. It's great. Any tips you would like on the property investment, the 3 core values you would like to just talk about in property investment?
They're very interrelated. Start early.
Yep.
Just make a start.
Yeah, love it.
Just make a start.
Love it.
If I was to write a book, I'll name it The First Step or something funkier than that. Yeah, right? Because that first step is the most important step.
Great.
And the answers will come thereafter and solutions will come thereafter. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. If you have, and most doctors are quite risk averse, do resi. It's quite safe.
Yep.
Majority of the time it's 100% tenanted. Rental yields right now is actually very good because there's a paucity of supply in residential property.
Very good.
Start with that. Start with that, then do a second one, do a third. Don't do apartments. Don't do apartments.
That way.
But get something with land
and
a property on it. If you're time poor, find a property that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, which is something that I've always done. And therefore, it's not going to be as time intensive as you think it will be.
Yeah.
Then your confidence will come up because you'll realise that it hasn't actually chipped away very much of your income because you've purchased a good, sound, foundational property.
Yes.
Then you'll get the confidence to get your second one. Then by the time you get to your third one, you're probably going to be bored at this point and you realise that this is actually quite easy. I've got my broker. I know how to get finance now. I know how my accountant's going to structure it. I'm willing to take it to the next level. Then start looking into commercial.
Yeah.
And commercial is more expensive in that you have to put more in as a deposit. The whole lending landscape changes. The game's different.
Yes.
But so are the returns.
Sure.
That's different as well.
Yeah.
And then delve into development and constructing. Start small. It could be that you're just going to do a land and house package and then move into duplexes and then flats and apartments and whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then 10, 20 years down the track, you get to that X factor point where the question becomes which property has got that X factor where I know I'm going to get capital growth and I can manufacture capital growth and the income yield from it because I'm going to deliver a product that everyone wants and everyone will pay me money for.
Yes.
And that's the ultimate pinnacle in the investment or the asset business.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's for another podcast, but I treat my properties like I treat my business.
Yes.
I'm reviewing it.
Yeah.
I'm strategizing.
100%.
I'm talking to my core people at the beginning of the financial year and I get things done by the end of the financial year.
Yeah.
I treat it like a business and it needs to serve its purpose, which is to make me money.
Of course. Yeah. 100%. You have to look at it that way.
Yeah.
If you don't put the light on it, the time will just pass, the property will just deteriorate or the market will change and all of a sudden you know that you haven't made the most of the market.
Yeah.
I've got some of the very savvy investor clients, they buy property just to basically wait for the right market to sell. They're not the ones who are like, oh, we buy property but we never sell. We never sell.
Yep.
It's a very sort of common saying in our community anyway, in our sort of subcontinental Asian community.
Yes.
Oh, we buy property because we like brick and mortar, but once it's in the family, it never goes.
Yes.
No, that's not how it works. You find the right market to sell, you find the right market to buy. You don't hold on to the property to basically be like, no, this is going to go with me in my will. No. If the market is right, and like, for example, the COVID market was so good for the selling purpose. One of my clients who's a very smart investor, she had cream properties in the blue chip suburbs of Melbourne. She decided to sell most of them. And one thing that she actually said to me was, when the market changes, you will never really see the bottom of the market because you'll only find out about the bottom when it's already started going up.
Yes.
Right? So important.
It has to serve a purpose.
There
has to be a strategy. If hold is your strategy because you want capital growth from it, because it's a generational piece, then by all means hold. But it can't just be a vanity metric. It can't just be when I pass away, I will have X amount of properties to pass over onto the next generation.
Yeah.
It can't be that. It's got to serve a strategy. Hold if it's a strategy, sell if you need to serve the next strategy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think we've covered some amazing points today. Thank you so much for being on our podcast. One last thing that I also wanted to ask you was if people want to reach out to you and if people want to sort of, know more about what you're doing and so on and so forth, where can they look for you for?
Okay, well, I'm very active on Facebook.
Awesome.
You can find me, Anna Pham, or I Am Anna, or our Facebook page called Doctors Helping Doctors Grow.
Yeah.
Just please answer the questions and put in your APRA number so I know you're a doctor or a dentist.
No worries at all.
Yeah, or a vet. So please fill out the questions. That makes my life so much easier. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. Find me under Anna Pham as well. And DM me and I'll get back to you.
All right. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thanks for being on our podcast once again and looking forward to what's next for us in the future.
Sounds great, Shubham. I can't wait.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot.
You.